Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Francine and Heather and Ron as well. When I was in graduate school, I spent a lot of time reading all of the journals that were sent to my program and thinking about them like, what is the party where my poems could go there and have a really good time? And AQR, hands down, was always the party I wanted to go to. So it was a real honor to have my poems appear there, I think in 2017. So I'm going to begin with a poem that was published in AQR from my collection, Take Me With You Wherever You're Going. And this is largely a collection of poems about marriage, but there were some poems of childhood and adolescence that snuck in, especially when early on in my relationship, I found out that my wife and I had some different ideas about propriety, and she was a little upset at me. And instead of making an excuse, I wrote a poem, and we're still married, so I guess it worked. Why give an excuse for skinny dipping when you can tell an origin story instead? Yes, I swam naked with strangers before we married, floated the dark coupling of creek and sky while stars lit my skin for others who were not you to see. But this was nothing new, meant nothing. As soon as I could walk, follow a trail of shed clothes, and you'd find me, mouth deep in the lake as the rain came down, watching each drop answered by a splash-tipped shoot, for my eyes alone, a fugitive garden. Why would I let anything between me and that world? Back on shore, backhoes chewed hungry at the ground, today's jagged pit, tomorrow's bulb-bordered pond. But in that taffied summer dusk, when hours bent near doubled without breaking, the whole was simply itself, in emptiness, in possession of nothing, in emptiness to be filled with whatever I saw fit. 96 degrees and 100% humidity equaled weather the same without as within. The heat amniotic, the pit slick with the once held breath of earth, with runnels of mud from afternoon rain. In a blue two-piece, I slid the sides until my parents left, and so did the suit. New flesh on new soil, baptized dark by dirt. Covered that way, I was made more visible. The hunger to plunge deep enough into every moment, to have my tongue swimming in it, to learn the world with my body. A map traced out, indelible, a map that would one day lead me to you. And in a drastic change of pace, I'm going to read the rest of the poems I read will be from a forthcoming collection which responds portion by portion to the book of Genesis. And I thought that following up a poem with so much mud, there's a great tradition in the Hebrew Bible of the earth being an active participant in human affairs. And in the case of Cain killing his brother, the earth actually cries out. And I feel like it's really time that we need to listen to what the earth has to say. So to begin with a quote from Genesis chapter 4, and God said to Cain, "Cursed are you from the ground that opened its mouth to take your brother's blood from your hand." And the ground opens its mouth to speak. Dear wandering dust, dear vagrant clay, dear humans made of me, how quickly you've forgotten. I am not just a backdrop for your horrors. Read your holy book. Stars and trees join in battle. Hills mourn. Valleys and waves tremble and writhe at the approach of God. And how many of your slaughtered have I choked down? I've borne witness to the force you've raised, evicting owls, salamanders, wolves, building your houses in hills just waiting to be wildfires. I am trying to warn you. For every season, I send wrong weather, drain reefs of their color, let whole species go extinct. Yet you go on. Enough. Too much. You are no longer the protagonist of this story. So try this other one. Seeing something he wanted across the road, a boy dropped his mother's hand and ran into the onslaught of traffic. She screamed his name, rooted there, unable to look away. At the clamor and rush, at a mere hissing so close past his ear, it raised the small hairs inside it. He ran back to her. Weeping, she slapped him hard. Weeping, he pressed the heat of his cheek to her chest. That slap, pain now to stave off worse later. A mark to carry with him and remember. I am so tired of being afraid for you. But of course we do not listen. And that was something I couldn't help but think about when delving into the story of the flood and Noah. And if you read that story very closely, what you find is Noah has 140 years between the moment that God warns him about the flood and when he actually builds the ark and the flood happens. And one of the things that commentators say again and again is he is silent. He never speaks, he never warns anyone. And then he builds an ark that is only small enough, only large enough for his immediate family and animals. And I just think about how we are building our own arks, us wealthy nations, and the people who are most affected by the climate crisis are those who are least able to create things to save them. So what can we do? What is our responsibility? And the only information you need for this poem is that the Hebrew word teva, which is normally translated as ark, can also be translated as word. Collective nouns as word, yeah, collective nouns. When Noah was still just a man, not yet sailor and savior, God said, "Make yourself a word, for I have decided to silence all flesh." Scraping muscle from a hide, his wife crouched nearby, listening. Without argument or question, without a single signal of warning to neighbors or friends, her husband, that little wind-up toy, God's docile errand boy, complied. He built the word to spec, big enough to hold two of every creature, but too small for her mother, too small for her brother, no matter how she begged. From planks of gopher wood smeared with pitch, Noah built the word and God shut them up in it. Water crushed down from the sky, fountained from the seas, dissolving living dust and breath to wreaths of hushed mud. And Noah, a silent man in a silenced world, drifting in a wooden word. With an otter placid as a stole across his shoulders, instead of talking, he lived in his hands, picking nets, troughing food and water, always more water, tending to every walking, creeping, winged thing, to all beings but her, never lying beside her, never tasting the taste of sleep. His tongue withered to a husk. The dark hold was mobbed with chitter, roar, and screech without restraint, and from outside the ceaseless babble of wood and rain. She was drowning in languages she couldn't speak, and he never offered her a word of comfort. When the rain finally ended, Noah bound a rope to the rafters. Before the raven, before the doves, he lowered himself from the word's one window. A splash, and he leashed the rope to his ankle, leaned back and let his hands fall empty, let the flood embrace him. Grime sloughed from him into the waves until the only animal he smelled was himself. Noah bobbed there, a beaming buoy tethered to the word in which the future floated, where his wife, unseen, the new Eve, humanity's unnamed mother, looked out from the window and watched as he gave himself to the killing waters, looked past him, trying not to think of the death and rot that berothed him. Is a man good, she wondered, who can construct a word large enough for only a chosen few? And now, regardless of any covenant that once rainbowed the sky, before the world is again silenced, the water and weather already rising, what noun collective, what peaceful fleet lashed by syntax and spring lines into a sentence of survival, what new words can we build to save us all? And I'm going to end on a slightly lighter note, I guess. One of the things I've been really fascinated by is etymology and how phrases that are commonly translated in one way actually mean something else when you really delve into them. Mazel tov. Circular breather. Our dog can whine without ceasing, his tail thumping the wall beside the bed to call me up and out to the yard instead. In moonlight, the hydrangea's white blossoms are a zodiac of branch-bound constellations. Once God called Abraham out from his tent to the open field to count the uncountable lights in the sky, promising offspring bountiful as dust, numerous as the stars. Like Abraham, I too left my land, my birthplace, my father's house. But the closest I have to an offspring is lifting his leg at the azalea, nose busy with the news the night air brings. Mazel tov, we say at births and other joyous occasions, the Jewish go-to for congratulations. Yet tov means good, and mazel, constellation or destiny. And sometimes, like Abraham, you must leave the place that grew you to grow toward better stars. In the house, my wife is sleeping. Along the fence top, a procession of possums reminds that even in darkness, there are those who can see. Above, trees thick with summer frame a porthole of sky. Maybe, though, it's not always the stars that matter, but the space between them, the lines we draw to shape the absence, the lives we forge around what goes missing. From the deck, the cool breeze makes a festival of the silver-lit leaves. Under my palm, there's the warmth of his fur, the rise of his ribs. He doesn't suspect his kidneys are failing, that his muzzle is white as the winter our vet has said he will not live to see. Like all of us, he is dying. Like most of us, he doesn't know it. His chin on my leg, he trusts me with the weight of his head. So if I wish you mazel tov, know what I mean is, may you find a reason to open your door to the dark. Almin, may you live beneath good stars and take the time to notice. Thank you.